And with that, allow me to introduce Rachel Boyd, who is the president of the Bowmanville Club, and as many of you know, is also our insurance specialist in the district. We have several of them, but Rachel in particular has often been our point person to help me manage the insurance relationship, especially when we get into more complex matters. And through that work, Rachel has developed a fairly detailed knowledge of our insurance program and has been able to assist a number of folks who are not literate in this area, shall we say, to work through issues as they arrive. So I'm very grateful that Rachel has offered to do this for us tonight. And Rachel, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks. Larry, have you set it up so that I can share screen?
Yes.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you for inviting me, Larry. I do think this is an important topic, and I do think it's important that you understand what your exposures are. So I'm going to go through a slideshow, and then feel free to ask questions through it. I suspect as I go through the slideshow, probably some questions you may have already in your head might be answered, but feel free to just interrupt me. Maybe use the hand, put your hand up on this thing, or ask a question in the chat. Okay, let me just share screen. So can everybody see the slideshow right now? Yes?
Yeah.
Wonderful.
I have a question.
Okay. Figures.
Since when is insurance fun? So, that's all.
Since I started doing it, that's when.
Okay, excellent.
All right, so let me just play from the beginning. All right, so this is going to be an exciting review of the District 707 insurance program. I guarantee it's going to keep you all on your seat. So sit back and have fun. What could possibly go wrong? So these pictures here were actually taken at a Bowmanville Rotary event last year at Mossport. And if you recall, that was the same weekend that the tornado hit Uxbridge, and it obviously did a lot of damage in a lot of places of Ontario. So I show this not because we had a claim with the Rotary Club, but this was an event that we were at. Some of our members had their cars damaged at it, but you can definitely see what can happen to one of those tents. These are huge racing tents. They can turn into a ball of tinfoil pretty quick. And you can see in the top, the tractor trailer that actually blew over because of the wind. So a lot of this stuff, acts of God instead of our control. So no activity is without risk. How do we protect ourselves? And these are just three rib fests. Many of our clubs have rib fests. Many of us have had situations, not all with an insurance claim, but I think everybody knows about Rotary Club of Whitby Sunrise's very first rib fest. And had to be absolutely terrifying. The lightning struck that happened that day, and kudos to the club for bouncing back and how they handled that. Bowmanville Rotary Club not too long ago was in the news because of a teen getting beaten at Ribfest pretty badly. Didn't turn into an insurance claim, but it doesn't mean we couldn't have been somehow brought into it if it was seen that our security was not suffice, that sort of thing. And then another claim with basically a slip and fall, a woman falling at one of the Ribfests and suing the club. So these things happen, and how do we protect ourselves is the question. So there's several ways to protect ourselves when there's risk. Insurance is just one of them. So we can transfer the risk, and we transfer it. The main way we do it is through insurance, and that's really what I'm going to talk about today. But I'm going to touch on some of the other ways as well. Certificates of insurance. So there's a lot of times, and we can go through it, on when we need to ask for the certificate of insurance, and we need to be added as additional insureds on the policy so that their insurance picks us up. And I'll go through those examples a little bit later. But Ribfest is a perfect example that some of our vendors, we want to make sure that they're giving us certificates of insurance and naming us on the policy. Loss control. We can mitigate a lot of loss and a lot of protecting ourselves by just doing different loss control, whether it's hiring security at these events, policing, training like Smart Serve, that sort of thing. Making sure there's first aid so that we're acting responsibly, and if something happens, we can handle it quickly. hopefully avoid a claim. And then this is back to, you know, the certificates of insurance, kind of making sure we're getting our insurance from vendors. A lot of and sorry, this wasn't so much certificates of insurance. I know at our RibFest event, we rent a lot of equipment. We rent fencing, generators, all this stuff. And there's always the option, do you add it on the district policy, or do you just pay extra from the vendor you're renting it off of and buy the insurance off them? And while that seems really unattractive because it often can be thousands of dollars, it is actually the way I recommend. And I can go through that a little bit later on why, but it's the easiest. And it's not that easy just to add it to the district policy. So who's an insured? This question comes up a lot, and this applies to all the liability on this policy, and specifically the D&O and the general liability, and even the abuse component of it. I want to make sure everybody understands the definition of insured includes not just Rotarians, members, board members, it includes volunteers as well. So this comes up a lot when we have events like a RibFest. We have a lot of volunteers there. We want to make sure that they're covered too. If there is a statement of claim, and we have our volunteers that are helping us out and they somehow get dragged into the claim, they're protected with us as well under our policy. So I'm going to start with where we would see the most claims. And I think probably the most important coverage that we have, and that's the general liability policy. So we currently have a 5 million limit with a 10 million aggregate, which basically means we can have 2 $5 million claims a year. Not that we want to, 3, you get the drift. So we can have the maximum Novex, our insurance company, will pay per year for I guess up to 2 claims or several claims. The maximum they'll pay regardless, 5 million per occurrence or 10 million total. The general liability policy has 5 main sections. Well, 4, and then I'll get into the extensions. The main coverages are your bodily injury and property damage. That's certainly where we're going to find people that are injured, those trip and falls. Even that lightning strike had the Whitby Club been sued for any sort of negligence. And we have the 5 million limit. There is a deductible. The deductible only would apply to property damage. So the property damage would be, the property damage is not coverage for stuff in our care, custody, control. But let's say we have equipment like a golf cart that we've rented. It's not protected, not covering the golf cart. But I'm driving the golf cart because I can't drive golf carts. I drive it right into somebody's property and I damage it. So whatever I drive it into would fall under this property damage coverage here. And there is a deductible there. There's no deductible if there's an injury claim. I don't know if you can see it, it's maybe written too small. We do have a sublimit for abuse, 1 million. So that's not a high limit, but it does protect the district and the clubs if there's allegations that we're dragged into, that someone may have acted inappropriately. So the abuse is quite a broad definition. It's everything from your emotional, mental, physical, sexual abuse sort of accusations. It's not meant to cover the perpetrator. It's meant to cover the entity. It's meant to cover the Rotary Club if we're pulled into it because we these are our members or these are our volunteers that are accused of this. Second is personal injury and advertising. This isn't a huge exposure to us. The main where we would have a claim there would be something advertising injury or personal injury. Let's say we have something on our web page, and I call this, rightly or wrongly, the hurt feelings coverage, because let's say someone goes on the Rotary Club of Bowmanville's Facebook page, I've posted something on there and it offends somebody, or they think it's incorrect. I've said something wrong, and they actually sue us over it. This is where we're going to find some coverage. Doesn't happen very often, but we do have the coverage if we need it. Medical payments. This is a handy little coverage. It is not meant for us. It's not meant for it is not meant to cover injuries of Rotarians, but it is meant to cover, let's say someone gets injured at RibFest, a trip and fall. They don't really want to sue us, but there is some expenses, and we acknowledge that we were at fault. Let's say we didn't use proper signage, there was something that they tripped over. There is some expenses, whatever it might be. And we have up to $50,000 for medical expenses where we feel we're liable and we want to help them out. We're trying to actually mitigate a possible lawsuit. I don't suggest, if a situation like this comes up, I do suggest reaching out to myself and the broker first to find out if that's the right course of action, because what we don't want to do is open a potential lawsuit. But it is a handy coverage to have as well. So tenants' legal liability, that is coverage if we're renting a space. Maybe you have your meetings in the same place every week. We have ours in a church. We have access to the kitchen. Let's say, I don't put, I'm a little forgetful one day and I leave the tap running in the kitchen. And sure enough, I flood the whole upstairs and cause a bunch of damage to the church. This is where we would have some coverage, tenants' legal liability. Only up to 1 million, but hopefully we're not renting spaces where there's an exposure much more than that. So we also have employer's liability. Now, it really doesn't so much apply because we don't have employees per se, but that would cover similar claims that you would see under WSIB. So let's say somebody is injured during a Rotary activity. So it's not like WSIB in the sense that there's still have to sue under employer's liability. For someone to sue us, there has to be an element of fault on the club. Like we would have had to be negligent in some way where we've done something wrong and that's why they have been injured. It's not just Rachel was careless and fell and was running, whatever. And any claims that would fall under that section of the policy would still be under the scrutiny of how much contributory the person who fell or whatever they did, pulled their back, whatever, how much contributory do they have? How much is the club truly responsible? So it's still a high level of the threshold you need to meet to prove that the club's actually liable for these potential injuries. But the coverage is there if we're dragged into something. And we've got the non-owned auto and the damage to hired. What this is, let's say, I'm going to give 2 examples. The one that's a 5 million limit, that's the liability. Let's say we're all going to carpool, we're all going to the Foundry Eastern Walk together, and I said, everyone get a lift with me. And we're out on Rotary business, and I'm not paying attention, and I drive right into a third party and I damage their car. And because I'm on Rotary business, they not just sue me, they sue the Rotary Club or the district. There would be coverage, not for me and not for my car, but there would be coverage for the district that would protect them from getting dragged into something. Ellie, you've got a question.
Yeah, it took me a while to find the hand. Somebody getting injured. How does that affect our clubs for our respite girls? Should I be chasing down WSIB to see if we need to do that?
Well, I don't think we've ever done it. So just to back up, everyone, Rotary Club of Bowmanville hires for students, ideally, maybe nursing students, ideally, and they work for the Rotary Club for roughly 11 weeks, and they work in families with special needs children, and they give them some sort of respite or relief for up to 8 hours a day, not a day, a week. So the idea is, I think what you're asking, Ellie, is let's say one of these students pulls their back because they're trying to help lift a child up or something like that, right? So they don't have the coverage like WSIB where, so we may want to look into that if it's necessary. And that's something that's probably best we check with WSIB, because the way the coverage we have right now, they'd actually have to sue the Rotary Club. And we'd have to get into, well, did you follow the proper procedures, or did we teach them how to lift someone and all that good stuff, right? It's probably something we should look into. At least they have some questions with WSIB on it.
Okay, I'll do that. Thank you.
No problem. So the hired auto is similar. A lot of, if any of you have a business, you probably have this on it. This would be similar to.
Sorry, Rachel. Gary has a question as well.
Oh, sorry, I can't see everybody's hands.
Yeah, I know that's a problem with the Zoom. We, at our Rib Fest this year, we had a property damage claim, which insurance covered, but the deductible was only $1,000. Here it says it's 2,500.
Well, then I think you got lucky. I'm not, the policy documents, I'm pretty sure say 2,500. We can double check it, but I believe the most recent documents say 2,500.
Well, I've got the check, so I'm happy
Yeah.
then.
Yeah, I'm happy for you. That's good. I can double check that, but you know, certainly 1,000 is a bit nicer than 2,500 for sure.
Yeah.
Thanks for letting me know that though, Gary.
Thank you.
So let's go back to my example where we're all driving to the foundation and I don't want to use my own car because I think you guys are all going to leave a mess in it and you're going to eat my car and I don't want you to do that. So I'm going to rent a car instead. And I rent the car and I do the same thing. I'm not paying attention and I damage the rental car. This is coverage for the rental car up to $50,000. Now that's not a high limit. When you, if I totaled that, we probably still would be short because you can't get, depends on what I'm renting. 50,000 might not be enough. But that coverage is there as well. So what are some main, I didn't want to go through, oh no, so here's some major claims examples that we might see at a Rib Fest or any of the events. So things that are covered, we do have coverage for. Food poisoning or alcohol poisoning, and we get sued. We have, our policy would respond and we would have to prove whether or not we were negligent or not, but we would respond with defense costs and compensatory damages if they had to be paid. Trip and falls and slip and falls over anything, cords, you know, electrical cords that are going up to the stage or anything like that, that would be covered. What is not covered, and which sometimes gets confusing when we talk about coverage for property damages, we do not have coverage under the liability section for damage to property in our care, custody, control. So if I rent generators for the weekend and I damage them, the liability policy isn't going to cover that. Or if I rent a golf cart without adding it to the policy first, and I drive it into something, or it gets stolen, the liability policy is not going to cover that. It's only going to cover what I'm responsible for that's not in my care. Something that has not been in my care, it's in the third party's care, and I somehow damage it. So hopefully that makes sense. Here's some key exclusions that I want to outline because they could be stuff that you're doing.
Sorry, Gary, do you have a question? Again, I can't tell.
Yeah, on that last issue you were talking about, we had the property damage that we had. We don't know who damaged it, and so that was, you know, our insurance had to cover it. But you mentioned the generators in that. The company that we use, they requested a separate policy covering their equipment that was on site, and we had to pay the premium on that. Right. I think it was about $500 for the premium for the.
Okay, and that's where your claim was, Gary?
No, the claim was park property, a light standard that someone ran into.
Okay, so that makes sense. So that, yeah, if someone ran into the light that's not, yeah, it wasn't in your care custody control, yeah, it makes sense. It's under the liability section. And then your generators, and they say, okay, you've got to buy a policy, and you buy it. Let's say something happened to them. It's not, all I'm saying is it's not this section of the policy. We've got a different section if we added it that we can cover it under, but that's going to be under property policy because it's in our care custody and control.
Yeah.
So we'll go through that. And then if it still doesn't make sense when I get to the property section, you put your hand up and set me straight and we'll get it all sorted.
Okay, thanks.
No problem.
Before moving on, I'm just looking at the insurance documents and actually specifically at the certificate of insurance for the Rotary Club of Scarborough. And Rachel, the miscellaneous articles floater deductible is $2,500. But there's another deductible for commercial buildings and contents, broad form contents.
Right.
which has a deductible of 1,000. So I don't know what the distinction is.
Yeah, and we'll get to that when we get there. Yeah, I'll try to explain that because it's a bit confusing. So we're gonna stay in the liability zone right now, even though it does get confusing because we're talking about damage to property. So we do not have coverage for amusement rides, inflatable, bouncy castles, all that. So many of us have those things at our Rib Fest. We are not covered for it. All the more reason we have to make sure the carnival peeps actually give us a certificate of insurance that lists the Rotary Club as additional insured. And if you can't get that, you don't want them to step foot on that property because there is no coverage if something goes wrong. So that is a must-have confirmation that they have coverage. And for amusement rides, you want 5 million because if something goes wrong, it's not going to be good. Tobogganing. So I know this seems like a real fun activity. There's no coverage for it. You might think it's going to be real fun to all go to Enniskillen and do some tubing with a bunch of people. There's no coverage for that. So don't have a Rotary event that Rotary sanctioned event and expect coverage for that. Fireworks. If you are having an event with fireworks, we will want to look into it and you need coverage. You're not going to find it here. So we can work through maybe an event policy to get coverage for that separately. Same with things like, I'm not saying you don't ever do tubing or tobogganing. What I'm saying is that there's no coverage. So if I will need to know, or Larry, we're going to have to know early on if you're doing one of these events that's going to need special coverage, and we will have to seek out an event policy specific that's comfortable with that exposure, and there will be an additional premium to cover that. Steve?
Joseph, you have a question?
Oh,
Yeah, so,
sorry, yours, it blended in with your background, Joseph. I'm sorry.
That's okay. We asked for our security as well to come in to have $5 million policy as well that we add, or we carry just in case something happens. They do something where somebody gets hurt. So we make sure that they're insured as well. And before we hire them, we make sure that we have their insurance policy and everything else.
Yeah, that's really important, especially when you're dealing with security, right? And under security, you're gonna have, if you're gonna have a bodily injury claim, a potential abuse claim. Oh, they physically abused me, they roughed me up, something like that. You want to make sure they have some coverage.
And another
and
point,
that we're listed.
And I think for tobogganing in the Toronto or the GTA, I think the city stopped having or allowing any tobogganing because of injuries. And there's only 2 places that are open. So it seems that they shut down tobogganing across of all the hills because of liability, I guess.
Yeah. So stage rental, and there's a big exception to this exclusion. So in general, if you rent a stage, the whole putting up of the stage, the takedown, while the stage is there is no coverage unless the insurance policy will give you coverage back if you get a certificate of insurance saying that the stage rental company has coverage up to 2 million. So then what happens, and this is what's at least much better than our coverage or lack thereof under the amusement, at least if we collect a certificate of insurance for the stage rental and we end up getting sued for 3 million, we know that our policy will step in and help. They will step in and help for that extra 1 million if the rental company doesn't have enough limits. So that is important to note. We can cover the stages, but there is some important limitations and rules on getting that coverage in place. So watercraft. It is listed as excluded because what they're talking about is things like ferries and bigger boats with bigger motors, your little tin tippies and your canoes and your, there is coverage for that. But in general, and keep in mind, we're talking about liability coverage. We're not talking about replacing a boat that gets stolen. We're talking about liability coverage specifically if you're sued because of the use of a watercraft. So these are your very small personal vessels with very small motors, if any, on them. Then we can have coverage for that, but we're not any of these boats that have big motors that are being used as a taxi of some sort or for hire, no coverage for that. We would have to get a separate policy for that. It's doable, but it's not covered here. So before I move on out of the general liability world into the directors and officers world, does anyone have a liability question that they want clarification on? And I can't
Yes,
see everybody.
I have one.
Go ahead, George.
Would we be better to get a certificate of insurance for it if we rent a large tent?
Yes, well, here's the thing with tent rentals, they probably want you to insure it, I suspect. When you're renting the tents and you're using them, I suspect whoever you're renting it from is probably going to say, if the tent gets damaged, it's up to the Rotary Club. And in which case the tent rental company will probably also give you a second option that says either you cover it under your policy, or we will charge you a fee of $500 or whatever, and we will cover it for you. That's the easiest option, but that's all going to be in the contract you sign with whoever the tent company is. Because and what they're talking about more is property damage. They're not talking about because really it isn't we're in full control of a tent. We can't, if let's say the tent isn't tied down properly enough and it blows away or something that damages someone, it's really hard for us to go back and say it's a tent company's fault. So that's something you're going to want to really look at the contract, find out our responsibility with the tent, and probably buy the coverage from the people you're actually renting it from.
Okay, we've never done that.
And that's my concern.
I was just thinking of even sort of the post gives away and falls down on top of everybody eating in there.
Yeah, and that's my concern is I think a lot of us think that there's more coverage, like, and I like to use RibFest because a lot of us have to rent a ton of equipment then, right? And the assumption that we have coverage under our policy for that needs to be cleared up because we don't. We don't unless, and the information that our insurance carrier would need to add all that's quite extensive. They would want to know, well, how old's the tent? How much did it cost? What's the make, model, and year of the generator and the SIN number? We don't, like, it's going to take us forever to track that down. Then they're going to underwrite it and price it, and we'll have a minimum premium, and it's a whole big task of, instead of just saying to the generator company, how much for me to buy the insurance off you. And certainly we had that option with every single vendor we had last year that we were in the contract, we were held responsible for it. If in your contract it doesn't hold you responsible for it, you don't need to worry about it. But a lot of these contracts do, if you're actually taking their property and borrowing it for 4 days or whatever. George, does that answer your question, kind of?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, I was just thinking a clear-cut example where you had a situation where the center pole just gave away and it was their fault, and somebody got badly hurt, and somebody wants to sue. Prior to that, if we haven't a certificate of insurance, do we have coverage in our insurance for that liability?
Yes, for the liability, not for the property.
Okay, no,
Okay.
liability would be the big thing, I guess.
For the liability, yes. So the liability, yes. The property, no. So
Okay.
Terry and then Dawn.
Thanks, Rachel. We are organizing an indoor event, renting the community center from the township. Comes with tables and chairs and a portable stage that we're planning to set up for a disc jockey, MC, that kind of thing. Is that stage, do we need to do anything about that stage?
So it's an indoor event. It's a portable stage. Are you and are you having to provide this venue with confirmation that we have insurance for that
Yes.
particular event? Okay.
Yep.
I think that's one that we should talk to the broker about directly, because that's a little bit different. Because I guarantee the stage that's indoor, it's probably not going to be the same sort of size and structure as a stage that's outside, that if a big storm comes through, it could cause a lot of damage.
Right, it's only one step up kind of thing.
Yeah, your worst case scenario is someone, backs up while playing guitar and falls off the stage probably, or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So let's have a conversation with Kelsey about that. Kelsey is our main contact at Norwich, who is our broker. And we'll just make sure that we're all on the same page with that example. But I think with that one, you're probably going to be fine.
Okay, thanks.
But we should at least double check so we don't get ourselves into a
Yeah,
problem.
I'll follow up.
Okay, Don.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. I'm not sure whether this fits in right now. It's a little bit of a general. It has to do with coverage and liability. A lot of us have foundations, and maybe you're going to get to this, but you know, we have the Rotary Club of Pickering. I'm from Pickering. We have a foundation that we run some of our events under from our Rib Fest, and we have a second foundation, a music festival. All of these three separate entities, they all have members. The board of directors is the same on all three. So I was just kind of wondering, are all three covered under the insurance of the Rotary Club of Pickering?
So this is one that Larry and I have tackled a couple times. For the coverage, so they can be done, but they can be covered if, and it sounds like it would with the situation you have. It has to be Rotarians from your club on those boards, where some foundations would have volunteers or individuals that are not Rotarian on there to give their expertise or whatever. Then it has to be separate. It has to be a complete separate policy.
Yeah,
Larry,
no,
am I misspeaking on this? Because I know you and I have had a few conversations on this.
Yeah, this was an exclusion that was introduced a couple of years ago where they would no longer automatically insure foundations that are part of what we do. But upon further probing, it became clear that as long as the foundation was completely controlled by the Rotary Club, and of course, the best way to do that is to have either the same board of directors for both organizations, or even if they're separate boards of directors, they are 100% members of your club, then you're going to be fine.
okay, great, thank you.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm not missing anyone else. It's only because I can't see all of you. So I think we've got everybody and we're caught up. So now I'm going to talk about the directors and officers insurance. And I probably get more questions on D&O insurance than I do on any other section of the policy. And I think especially when you have members that are now coming onto the board, there's all of a sudden a concern that are they protected not only by the decisions that the board makes, but by the activities that the club has, and what happens if they're personally named in a statement of claim. So, and I'm going to answer that question in a bit, but I'm just going to first by say a D&O policy is a claims made policy. And that's a little different than many liability policies. It's different than a general liability policy because a general liability policy is occurrence based. So, but as long as the claim occurred during the term of the general liability policy, it would be reported during that term. Claims made is a little bit different, not to get too technical, but sometimes with a claims made policy, you don't even hear about it. You don't even hear about a D&O claim until maybe 2 years after the claim occurred, just based on the type of claims that come in. So how a D&O policy is different, it doesn't look at the date of loss on when the event occurred. It's when the claim has been brought forward, when the claim is made. So as long as the claim has been brought forward and we have coverage in place for that period of time, then we would report the claim. So I won't get into that much more because we really don't need to, but I'm happy to discuss it to death if we really need to clear it. But it is a little bit different. The main thing is if you get a statement of claim, no matter what, send it to us right away so we can deal with it. We have a $3 million limit. The deductible is $2,500. We do have extensions on the policy for employment practices. And I'm going to get into some claims examples that explains that, but your main employment practices sort of claims are things like harassment and discrimination. And just like on the general liability policy, volunteers are actually still included. It's not, this coverage is not for just the board of directors, it's for all your members. It's for their spouses too, because you never know when someone gets angry and sues you guys, they're going to sue your entire family. They might sue the estate if the Rotarian's already passed away. They might sue a Rotarian that's no longer a Rotarian anymore. But they're all covered here. They're all covered here. So you don't have to worry about what if I step down and or am I going to be covered? I'm not a Rotarian anymore. Will the policy still respond to me? Yes, it will. It still will. What if my wife gets dragged into this because I don't think they like her? She's covered. It's okay. So what is the wrongful act? Now, the definition in our policy is actually more extensive than this. It has a couple more things, but they don't apply, so I didn't put them on here. So a wrongful act is really just a lot of the decisions that we make as a club, not just as a board. So, so things like breach of duty, negligence, misstatements, all innocent things that can happen, and all could be just based on interpretation by the person that's suing us. But there is coverage for that. And then your employment practices, which again, that's only $250,000 coverage there. But your discrimination, I wasn't allowed into the Rotary Club. I was asked to leave the Rotary Club. I didn't feel welcome at the Rotary Club. I wasn't allowed in the Rotary Club event. These sort of things would be covered here. Wrongful discipline. You know, I've had to have tough conversations with Rotarians in my club. Maybe they think I was too tough. Who knows? Harassment, humiliation, invasion of privacy. All these sort of things could be covered under this section of the policy. And it applies whether it's a Rotarian that's been named directly or whether it's just the club in general or the district that's been named. There's coverage for all of that. Third-party employment practices. Okay, so this would be more, so this could be like a more your Ribfest example. I wasn't allowed into Ribfest, and maybe they were not let in because they were drunk or acting like a fool, but who knows, right? We would have some coverage here. Or it could be a guest that we had, a guest speaker. Maybe we didn't make them feel welcome. Maybe we offended them. That sort of thing could be covered here. So the main exclusion. Oh, sorry, John Burns, you've got a question.
Yeah, on the D&O insurance, is there any difference between a club that's incorporated or not incorporated?
No.
No? Okay.
So your main exclusions, and there's a few, but they all fall into three sort of categories. There's not an insurance policy out there that is going to cover intentional dishonest acts, but it has to be proved, right? So, so obviously, like, if you've got some collusion going on with your board, that's not the purpose of this policy to cover that bad behavior. But again, there would have to be legal charges and all that for the policy not to respond to the allegations for the wrongful act. When I say other insurance, this is actually the most asked question to me that's ever asked about insurance. Is I have people calling me and they're really worried that they're having a Ribfest event. What if somebody gets injured and I'm named on the policy? Will the D&O policy respond? And they don't like the answer when I say no, because they, well, how? And I say no, because the general liability policy is going to respond. So when I say things like other insurance, it means there's coverage elsewhere, or there should be. It's never going to respond to an auto claim that one of us is listed in, because it's not an auto policy. It has to be on a management decision, a wrongful act that we made as a club, on the decisions we made to run the club. So it's not saying that the package doesn't the program doesn't cover it. It's just not covered under this section. And when I say timing, I mean that maybe the incident was long before we had insurance in place. So of course it can't respond to that. So as long as it's covered in the policy period, then the coverage will be in place. Those are your main exclusions. That's it for D&O, but I suspect there's more questions, because there usually is. Is there anybody that has another question or concern about D&O insurance? Whoa, we're flying. Okay, good. Crime insurance. This is one that's not a lot on our radar a lot, but it's important. And the most important part of this, sadly, is the employee dishonesty, which basically is, unfortunately, our own members may be stealing from the club, which, you know, we all like to think never happens, but I used to specialize in nonprofit insurance, and nonprofits actually have more employee dishonesty claims than for-profit companies. So desperate people do desperate things. So we have to be protected. We are not protected by a high amount, only 50,000. If your club has people with access that is not properly supervised, with access to money much higher than that, it is a limit that might not be adequate. Theft or burglary, you know, that is going to be, so the situation I think of Ribfest, right? You've got your your runner, your walker, the person that's carrying the money, around Ribfest and taking it to the bank for you. And someone's figured out, because it's way too obvious that they're carrying what looks like a money bag, and someone jumps them and steals the money, and there goes $15,000 or whatever it is. You've only got coverage up to $25,000. So keep that in mind if you're moving money around or carrying money, especially at these big events where there's a lot of money. That's the maximum coverage you have. So you should never be carrying anything more than that. And obviously you should be having safety precautions and measures in place to make sure that it's safely being moved. Ellie, it's you, hon.
Is this 25,000, is that per incident or for
Yes.
a period? Per
Yep.
incident.
Per incident, it is. And so with the sorry, Ellie, did you say something else?
Nope.
Okay, and so is the employee dishonesty, which is unusual, because employee dishonesty is usually in the aggregate, meaning now they're going to try to track it down to one incident, and one person would in essence be one claim, but that one, that one's worded a little bit different than a normal crime policy. We do have coverage for fraud, including computer fraud. The main one that would be here is your phishing, right? Someone sends a message to Ellie saying, from my email address, telling Ellie, oh, hey, can you pay this? We made a donation to them, and can you just do an e-transfer over here? We, of course, have measures in place that none of us in the club can send an e-transfer or write a check without two of us okaying it. But let's say you had a club that had a checkbook that had pre-signed from one of your signature, like one of your people that have approval to sign the checks, and the other person just had to go in and sign it, because whoever was responsible for signing the checks was like, oh, here's the checkbook, Ellie. I'm going to sign 5 checks for you so you don't have to come track me down. And Ellie writes a check that she shouldn't have. Because that's happened before. And I've seen that. And so don't do that. Don't pre-sign checks. Don't have someone sign it to make the life easier, because it's stupid. And it's careless. Expenses, this is just the expenses involved, accounting expenses, that sort of thing. If there was a claim and we had to establish what our loss was. Property coverage. So assume we have none. And on the deck page, Larry is right. Under building and contents, it does say the deductible is 1,000, but it also shows a limit of 0. But actually, I think it shows there's a limit of 25,000, but then it says as per property floater. So if you have property, if you have a building or a set of contents, because maybe you rent a location most people don't have like contents that shouldn't be on a floater. Most clubs don't have a building, but if you do, let us know what the difference between that coverage and the floater is that has the 2,500. A floater is contents or equipment that move around. For example, we have a storage unit. It's actually at a Rotarian's business where we keep a bunch of our stuff that we use all the time. The same stuff we bring to Ribfest, and we all keep it there. But let's say that burned to the ground. We as a club, we don't have coverage for that. Now, nothing in there is high value, so we've kind of decided that that's okay. But if you have anything of value that you want to make sure you've got coverage for, you want to run it past, because you can have, and a lot of the clubs do, they have a separate document that's issued specifically to their club, which outlines what their coverages are and what's in place. That's maybe above that $25,000, because it still would be, even though it says on the policy $25,000 property floater, I still think it would be a bit of a battle. If you've got the coverage, let's just add it and make it clear cut. So if there's a claim, there's no pain in the butt that we're going through. We just know for sure there's some coverage in place. So that was my main thing, is just, if you do have a lot of property, let us know about it. I just want to go through some gaps in coverage. We don't have cyber insurance. We've talked about it. It's not anything that we've seen as high risk right now. Is it something that's on our radar? And we probably will consider it again, probably. Your main exposure there is, really though, is just someone hacking into your systems. And again, the equipment that they hack into has to be Rotary Club equipment, where I think a lot of us are using members equipment. So even if someone hacked into an email or something, probably the laptop or the computer system or hardware is probably a personal employees and not even the clubs, but or ransom. The main extortion is the main cyber loss that's happening right now. But I can't see anyone trying to extort money out of a Rotary Club because we're just a really low exposure. But it is an exposure, albeit minimum. We have no coverage for that. We don't have an umbrella or excess policy. Our limits are our limits that are on the GL policy, general liability. We don't have higher limits than that. Maybe one day we will. There's no pollution coverage. And we really don't have a pollution exposure, but I'm just putting that out there that there is no coverage. So if you're dealing, let's say you rent a bunch of generators at Mosport or not at Mosport or at a Ribfest, and you leave the property with what anyone may say is a pollutant, and anything can be considered a pollutant. They can consider spilt milk from an auto claim, a trucking claim. It can be a pollutant if it gets into a water source. So there's no pollution coverage if we were ever dragged into something like that. But the exposure is so minimal. Okay, any questions?
I have a hypothetical one.
Sure.
If a member of the board signs a contract and
Okay.
they sue the club, somebody sues the club, and the club and the amount they're claiming is greater than the coverage.
Right.
And they go after they would go after the individual. So
well, so what kind of
depends.
Yeah, it depends what kind of claim it is. And I'm just bear with me. I'm just going to try to get out of this. I'm going to try to get back to stop sharing. Sorry about that. Okay, let me.
I just did it for you.
Oh, okay, thanks. Okay. Okay, so we're sued and our policy limits are not high enough. That was the question, right?
Right.
So this happens all the time with just regular customers. What typically happens then is the insurance company would say, the adjuster would say to you, look, you've been sued for 5 or you've been sued for 10 per occurrence. We only have 5. I suggest you seek out legal counsel for the additional 5. You can or you can't. They just have to say that. They have to say that to protect themselves. Typically, if you're sued for 10 and you have 5, the chance of you paying over 5 is extremely low, but you probably want some sort of legal counsel staying on top of it just in case. The money would not come out of an individual. It would come out of the club, and it could possibly bankrupt the club. It's the reality of it. So probably not the answer you want, but the likelihood of that happening is very low.
Mm-hmm. It could be a reality just the same.
Yeah, it absolutely is, right? And that's the tough thing is we go through what's an exposure and what's not, and how do we make decisions based on how much premium we want to spend and where is the highest need on where we're going to be, where we want to pay for this, right? We have asked the policy limits. Larry, I know we last year we increased the D&O from 2 to 3, I believe. Maybe it was the year before, but that's something. Our renewal comes up in September. Those are conversations that Larry and I can certainly have, saying like, let's ask for a quote for a 10 million general per occurrence. But those ultimately those costs come back to your club, and still there's a cost involved with that. Lynn, I think you were next.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, this is probably a very stupid question. Going back to the general and liability insurance, and you talked about a 5 million limit per occurrence and 10 million for the year.
Aggregate. Yep. Aggregate.
Is that for the whole district or for each club?
That's actually an excellent question. That's for the district. So the Bowmanville Club could blow it all in one claim, right? And then that just means we only have one more claim. Now, having said that, our loss history is very clean. We have not, you know, you have to look a little bit at, like, as a bit of an actuary's hat and kind of think statistically what is going to happen, because we've never come close to a large liability claim like that in our district. But that is a good question. It's something we would need to be aware of. And I would think if we had a, let's say we had a claim come through to Bowmanville, we got sued for something big, you know, that would be a serious conversation right away with districts saying, look, we're down to 5 million for the rest of the 54 clubs right now. Do we want to try to price out higher limits now? What do we like? Those are conversations we would want to have if we saw a big claim come through.
Okay, thank you.
I think it was Laura and then Dan, and then we've got a few. Laura?
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. Yeah, so we're just kind of looking into this now because with Elevate Rotaract, it's something that's definitely like we want to look into and make sure we have processes and policies in place. So I guess like my first question is, in terms of like if we have any questions about the insurance or if something does happen, who would be like our first point or who's our best point of contact for that? And then my second question is, so I'm in the process of developing, or I have created like an event guide for our members to refer to. So I'm wondering, is there anything that I should be including in there to take into considerations the insurance policy and like what they should do if something does happen?
So Larry and I should be your contacts if you have any questions. And certainly you can reach out to me anytime and I'll make time for you as soon as I can. With respect to a guide that you're doing, I'm happy to review it. If you want to put together what you think is your best practices, I've reviewed a lot of these. I'm happy to review these and give you my thoughts on if there could be any improvements made to it.
Awesome. That would be really great. Thanks.
No problem. Dan.
Just wanted to talk about Great Lakes watershed. Can you have a bit? Rachel, I know we've talked about this in the past, but one of our peer districts who also participates insists on waivers for their non-Rotary members. Given the risks associated with a step and fall, a cut, water, rocks, etc.
It's not a bad idea. It's you know, it's not a bad idea. We insist on them at RibFest. You know, the waivers are only as good as you know, waivers aren't bulletproof. They're not a bad idea. Having volunteers, it's, you know, having a waiver. I'm happy to send you the one we use at RibFest and you can tweak it. I believe it's very similar to what Ajax used at their RibFest. Waivers are always a good idea. Like I said, they're not bulletproof, but they're helpful. If we are sued, it's not going to make the claim go away, but it might make the damages we pay less.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. I think Yosef, you were next, and then Oko.
I didn't have a question.
No, I think
Okay.
Marcia's next, actually.
Oh, Marcia. Sorry, Marcia. You disappeared on me. There you are.
That's okay. Very well done, Rachel. Nicely done.
Thank you.
Good slides, everything. I just want to say, yeah, we have waivers as well. And it instead of somebody just taking action, they might come and talk first. So you can, you know, dissolve a little bit of the issue. But one thing everybody that's sitting on a board should consider is a personal umbrella on your home and auto. It covers expenses. It gives you another layer of coverage. You would reduce your personal liability coverage to $1 million, and then you buy your umbrella up to 3 or 5, whatever you choose. It's not that expensive, but it's something you should look into.
That's a great point, Marcia. Marcia certainly knows personal lines 1,000,000 times better than I do. But that protects you not just for you know, the work you do as a Rotarian and your work, but even just your own personal liability as a homeowner. And your personal liability policy, umbrella policy would go for your auto, lots of things like that. And
it covers you traveling as well. It is quite broad and the cost is minimal.
So Marcia, if someone has a question about that, can they reach out to you direct?
Sure, not a problem. Yeah.
Oko, I hope I'm saying your name correctly. You're on mute. Yeah, you're still on mute. Oh, there you go.
There we go. We have a golf event, and it involves people having a meal in the clubhouse, playing 18 holes, and use of a cart. So should we be a named insured on the club's own policy?
Yes, ideally I would ask for one. So for one, make sure the golf course is getting waivers signed. Golf courses are notorious for insurance claims. So I would make sure that that anyone that's golfing is signing a waiver. I think if you're having an event there, are they serving the food, the alcohol, all that stuff? Yeah, I would ask them for proof of insurance in place. And I would ask them to name your particular club as additional insured.
Okay.
I would also ask that they have at least $2 million worth of coverage. And I'm happy to send you the wording on that if you need any of that.
Thank you.
All right. If there isn't another question, Larry, did you want to just end now because we've only got 2 minutes, or do you want me to quickly, what all I'll say, I'm not necessarily going to show you, but to find the insurance documents, it's super easy. You go into Rotary 7070, you just search, under search, you write insurance, all the policy documents are there. You can look at them yourselves, have a peek. If you have a question, you can reach out to me. My contact information's there. The insurance broker's contact information is there. All the information on how to request a certificate of insurance is there.
Thank you, Rachel. Just a couple of things that I wanted to add, some notes that I was making over the course of the conversation. It's not uncommon for clubs to choose to purchase additional coverage. And sometimes that's a one-off relating to a particular event. Sometimes it's additional coverage that's required on an ongoing basis because, for example, you have more property than our rather small limit will cover. So if that's needed, that's a conversation that you can have with our broker, Kelsey Shafsma, and additional coverage can be arranged for a particular club over and above what the standard district policy provides for. So that's one thing I wanted to mention. And the other thing is just the importance of, we're very fortunate in this district to have people like Rachel and Marcia and as resources for members to call upon for advice. Remember, they're one of us. Yes, they are insurance specialists, but they don't work for the broker. They don't work for the insurer. They are Rotarians. They are on our side. So we're welcome to have candid conversations about issues that come up that we want to learn more about. And it's great that we've had more and more of our members speak with Rachel in particular over the past couple of years, as sort of the profile of this has been increased, and people are paying more and more attention to insurance and risk management generally. And to have an opportunity to have a sort of a casual conversation with Rachel to see if there's additional risk management measures of an insurance nature that we should be doing for particular events or on an ongoing basis. Not only is it helpful to you perhaps to deal with a particular problem, but it also gives Rachel and myself the sort of the knowledge of what's happening out there in the community to see if we should be going to the broker at the time of the next renewal and arranging for additional coverage more broadly. So please keep those questions and feedback coming over the course of the Rotary year. If there's no, Gary.
Will a copy of this presentation be available to us?
Yeah, I've been doing the recording. The recording will be posted. And Rachel, if I can get actually, I think I have the presentation from you, don't I? So
I changed it a bit, so I'll send it to you.
Okay, perfect. So I'll make sure that the folks on the call get the presentation directly.
Okay, good, thanks.
And thank you very much for your time and attention. And for the regulars on the call, our next get together, as I recall, is on Thursday, April 6th. It'll be a more conventional conversation as we usually have in these regular monthly meetings. Last month we had Terry Caputo. Tonight we had Rachel, but next month we'll have a more traditional meeting, and I'll be back to the folks with an agenda for that meeting in the coming days.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thanks for the invite and thanks for the
Thanks.
positive feedback in the chat, everyone.
Thank you, Rachel. And
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Rachel.
Bye.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
folks.
Rachel.
Thanks. Have a good night.
Take care.
Night.
Bye.